In 1959, in the quiet town of Ypsilanti, Michigan, something strange was happening. It was the dawn of a new era. America was full of promise, its institutions fortified by a belief in progress and scientific reason. But beneath the polished veneer, cracks were starting to show. It was a time when psychologists, freed by their newfound authority, began probing the darker recesses of the human mind, convinced they could understand and ultimately control what lay within. This is where Dr. Milton Rokiach comes in, a man driven by the question, what happens when reality itself fractures? In his hands, human beings became subjects, pieces in an experiment that reflected not just their own delusions, but the creeping anxieties of a society on the brink of change. Rokiach gathered together three men, each one believing they were Jesus Christ. Leon Gabor, a Polish immigrant. Clyde Benson, an elderly farmer. Joseph Castle, a factory worker. Individually, they were nothing remarkable. Patients in a psychiatric ward, their delusions easily dismissed as symptoms of mental illness. But together, in a single room, they became something more, a mirror held up to the emerging tensions of the American psyche. Rokiach believed that by confronting these men with each other's conflicting identities, he could break them down, forcing them to reckon with the impossibility of their beliefs. But his experiment was built on a flawed assumption, the idea that human beings, when faced with contradictory evidence, will choose rationality over delusion. But as with so many of the projects of the 20th century, things didn't quite go to plan. Instead of abandoning their delusions, the three men adapted. When Leon declared that he was the true Jesus, Joseph responded that Leon must be insane, and Clyde dismissed them both as frauds. The very act of being confronted with an opposing truth only reinforced their own convictions. It was the psychological equivalent of the arms race, each man building mental defenses higher, refusing to yield. Rather than cracking, they became fortified. In many ways, this experiment was a microcosm of the broader forces at play in post-war America. The belief that the world could be reshaped through reason and logic was running up against the messy, unpredictable realities of human nature. It was a time when governments, corporations, and psychologists alike thought they could engineer a better future, yet they found themselves confronting a world that resisted their control. Just as Rokiach tried to manipulate the minds of these men, America was trying to reshape the world in its own image, exporting democracy, capitalism, and freedom through a mix of propaganda and military might. But like the three Christs, the world refused to conform to a singular vision of reality. Instead, competing ideologies hardened, borders were drawn, and the Cold War entrenched. In the end, the experiment failed. Rokiach couldn't break the delusions of the three Christs, but what he had exposed, perhaps unintentionally, was something much deeper. He had laid bare the limits of human reason, the fragility of identity, and the unsettling truth that when people are pushed into confrontation with their own contradictions, they don't collapse. They double down. In this story, there's a disquieting realization that the systems we build, the psychological models, the social institutions, the political structures, are not as robust as we believe. Beneath it all, the human mind remains a chaotic, unpredictable force, constantly constructing and reconstructing its own version of reality. And in that uncertainty lies both our greatest strength and our greatest vulnerability. This, then, was the lesson of Ypsilanti, that in a world where everyone believes they are right, the truth becomes a slippery, elusive thing. And the more we try to impose order, the more the chaos seeps through.